Hey guys, welcome back. We are entering another exciting portion of the hunting season. We are right on the doorstep of the 2023 whitetail rut. So in today's video, we'll be talking about several tips to hopefully help you guys find success during the rut. The rut can be one of the most exciting times to be in the woods, and that's because there's a lot of randomness to it. You really have no idea what could happen next. You don't know when that local giant could come walking by your stand. But with that randomness and the excitement that a lot of times comes with it, there can also be a lot of frustration because, again, the movement is a little bit more random during the rut. And like we've talked about in our previous videos leading up until this point, deer movement throughout the early part of the season and through the pre-rut is fairly predictable. The buck movement up until this point of the season is fairly predictable. But once those first couple does go into estrus, your local bucks are going to know, and that's the only thing that they're going to focus on for the next couple of weeks, which again makes their movement a lot more unpredictable, more random. With that being said, there is a lot of consistency with what the bucks are trying to accomplish during the rut, and that's breed as many does as possible. So while their movements are oftentimes unpredictable or random because they're chasing does all over the neighborhood, and they're not really on that bed to feed pattern like they were up until this point, there is consistency with what they're doing. They're trying to breed as many does as possible. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about in this video. A few tips for hunting the rut that will hopefully take the chaos out of it, the randomness out of it, and help you guys find consistency when targeting those local bucks. And the first tip that I have for you guys for hunting the rut is a fairly obvious one, but it's extremely important, so I do have to talk about it. And it goes back to what I just said about what the bucks are doing this time of year. And if you're trying to hunt a buck during the rut, then you need to think like a buck. And what are the bucks trying to do right now? They're trying to breed as many does as possible. So if you're trying to get close to bucks during the rut, a good strategy is to try to find those doe family groups. So if you want to hunt bucks during the rut, it's a good idea to also hunt those doe family groups. When the bucks are done breeding the doe that they're currently with, they're going to start searching for that next receptive doe. And just like we talked about during the pre-rut video, these bucks spent a lot of time figuring out where these doe family groups are spending time. They know exactly where to look when they're trying to find that next receptive doe. This is where scouting the area that you're hunting or installing habitat improvements on your property can give you a huge advantage. Again, if you know what he's looking for, does, and you know where those doe family groups are likely to be, then you know exactly where you need to set up depending on the time of day. During the rut, if you can find those doe family groups, then you have a pretty good chance of getting close to those local bucks. The next tip that I have for you guys for hunting the rut is another simple one, and that's just to be in the woods as much as you can. You never know when your target buck is going to walk by your stand. I know we said it earlier, but I'll say it again. Buck movement during the rut is a lot more random than it has been up until this point of the season. They're not only moving early in the morning and late at night. During the rut, they could move at any time throughout the day. And with being in the woods as much as you can, I do understand that it's easier for some guys to sit every day as opposed to others. Not everyone has the same amount of vacation time, but if you have time available, if you're free, try your best to get in the woods because, again, you never know when that local giant is going to start walking around. Now, with that, hunting as much as you can, I am still giving priority to certain stands over others. I'm not hunting my favorite stand every single sit. Depending on the weather, if it's really warm, for example, I'm not going to push into my best stand location. Last year, for example, we had a pretty warm rut, and a few years ago, we had a pretty warm rut. If there's a warmer day, I might sit back a little bit and save some of my better stand locations for those cooler, more comfortable, more favorable cruising temperatures. But even on those lower probability days, that warmer weather, if your buck is done breeding the doe that he's with, there's a good chance that he's still going to get up and start looking for the next one. And you just want to make sure that you're out there because he could walk by searching. And that's going to lead in perfectly to the next rut hunting tip, and that's on those higher probability days, that cooler weather, try your best to sit all day. Do an all-day sit. I've said it a lot so far in this video, and I'll probably say it a few more times, but during the rut, we never know when that buck is going to get up and start walking around. So on those higher probability days, we want to try to sit in our stand as long as we can. And if you're able to do it, try to sit all day. Now, I do understand that's easier said than done. All day sits can be tough, especially on those days where you're not really seeing a whole lot of movement. But During the rut, they're very worth it because there's a lot of times where you'll be sitting there 1 o'clock in the afternoon and here comes a nice buck cruising down the trail that you're hunting. A couple things to touch on with all-day sits. When we're going out there and we're going to be in the woods from sun up to sundown, we're not going to be in the same stand the entire time. In the morning, we're going to be focusing on those bedding areas, getting on the downwind side of those doe bedding areas, because that's where that buck, he's going to be searching for that next receptive doe. But in the evening, those does, they're going to start transitioning to that food source. So we want to do the same. So right around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, we're going to be getting down from our stand, getting out of there and then moving to an evening stand location near or maybe on the way to that evening food source. So we can catch those does as they're going to that food source and hopefully catch the buck as he's trying to find, again, that next receptive doe. So even though we're in the woods all day, we're not in the same stand all day. We're hunting at least 2 different stands. And a case can be made, you could even hunt a 3rd stand midday. So maybe in that midday time frame, you're not really seeing a whole lot of action around those bedding areas. Maybe slip out of that bedding area stand location and try to find one of those cruising corridors that these bucks really like to use when they're going from bedding area to bedding area. Maybe 2 bedding areas within your property or maybe a bedding area on your property and a bedding area on the neighbors. A lot of times where we hunt in a mixed ag region, these cruising corridors are the connecting cover that connects 2 different woodlots in the neighborhood. So as these bucks want to move from one woodlot to the other, they don't want to expose themselves in the open field. They're going to stick close to this cover. So if you have an area on your property or maybe there's a section of your neighbor's property that touches yours, this can oftentimes be a great spot to set up midday because it pinches down the buck movement as they're out searching for that next doe. If your property or the area that you're hunting is in a heavy cover area, the bucks move in a very similar way. Their cruising corridors are similar. They still do not want to expose themselves in open hardwoods. They're much more likely to stick to the thickest cover that works through the area as they're moving from point A to point B. If you can find a section of that thicker cover, that's within the open hardwoods that pinches down so that the thick cover is starting to pinch down a little bit, it's starting to get smaller, that's going to, again, consolidate that buck movement. And this would be a great spot to set up on one of those cruising bucks during the rut. The next tip that we have for you guys for hunting the rut is very similar, but it's for those of you guys that don't really like sitting out all day. But the tip is sit out as long as you can. Most of the time when you go out hunting, you have a pretty good idea of how long you want to sit for, but during the rut, whatever that time is, if it's 10:30, 11, try to add a half hour. Try to add 45 minutes. Try your best to spend a little extra time in the woods during the rut. There's a lot of older bucks that go down in that 10 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon time frame every single season. If you're getting out of your stand at 10 in the morning, you're going to be missing that potential opportunity. The next tip that we have to hopefully help you guys find success during the rut is to rotate your stand locations. Switch it up a little bit. Don't get stuck hunting the same stand over and over again. There are going to be better stand locations on your property. That's why you have favorites. But by over-pressuring a certain stand or an area of your property, you're going to be pushing deer out of that location. Try to spread the pressure throughout your property. And the stand that you always walk by, the stand that no one's hunted in the last 5 seasons, that could be everyone's favorite stand next year because that could be the stand that you shoot your target buck out of this year. So just try to remember to rotate between different stand locations. Don't get stuck hunting the same stand for 2 weeks. I try to look at it like this. My favorite stand is always going to be the next stand. The next tip that I have for you guys for hunting the rut is to not forget about those community scrapes or those perennial scrapes on your property. A lot of times when we're thinking about scrapes, we're thinking about the pre-rut, the last 10 days of October, when these bucks are actively working these scrapes. They're constantly checking and working scrapes. But don't discount or forget about those scrapes during the rut. Now, I will say that we don't really see the bucks actively working the scrapes as much during the rut as we did during the pre-rut, but these bucks are still checking these scrapes. When a buck has finished breeding the doe he's currently with and he's going to start searching for that next receptive doe, he's going to start searching in those areas that he knows the does frequent. And one area on your property that these does spend time are these communication centers, these community or these perennial scrapes. And so while we don't see the bucks actively working or opening up the scrapes during the rut like we do during the pre-rut, we do still see these bucks checking on these scrapes during the rut as they're searching for that next receptive doe. I think I've mentioned this in the past, but it's worth saying again, and that's every season while hunting the rut, I see at least one buck bedding down either in or right next to one of these community scrapes. A lot of times he checks that scrape, walks 5 yards, and beds down. So even though the bucks aren't working the scrapes as much during the rut as they were during the pre-rut, these are still locations on your property that you should be thinking about when trying to decide, what stand to sit. And the last tip that I have for you guys in today's video, and that's because it's starting to rain right now, is my favorite day to hunt. And that's, if you can, try your best to hunt Halloween. I'm not sure what it is about October 31st or Halloween, but our properties always seem to have some pretty good rut activity on that day. Whether it's been observations from the stand or going back to look at trail camera pictures, there always seems to be a lot of older bucks up on their feet moving on Halloween. And I know that last tip is really last minute considering when this video is dropping. Halloween is going to be tomorrow. But if you can, try your best to get in the woods. But that's going to wrap it up for today's video on a few tips for hunting the rut. We did not cover everything. There is so much to talk about when talking about hunting the rut. But hopefully this video helps you guys find success. If you guys do have any questions, please drop those in the comment section below. Good luck this season, and we will see you guys in the next video.